Wrestle Machine reporting for duty. I've scoured the interwebs for more wrestling info from 1995. February 20, 1995 Observer Newsletter. WCW makes the big jump to 9 pay-per-views per year, raises prices, pay-per-view schedule, major mainstream article on UFC 3 talking Shamrock and Royce, tons more. Wrestling Observer Newsletter P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228, February 20, 1995. World Championship Wrestling has taken the next step in the experiment to find out what exactly is the saturation point for pay-per-view wrestling. WCW has now taken the gamble of taking pay-per-view from being a quarterly special megacard to something akin to a bi-monthly special to basically being a monthly major house show, with the decision to drop both the June and November Clash of the Champion cards and replace them with pay-per-view shows. This will give WCW 9 pay-per-view shows and 2 clashes in 1995, the only one remaining being in August, with the distinct possibility of dropping clashes altogether after the next one and going to 10 or 11 pay-per-view shows in 1996. Between WCW's 9 shows, the WWF's 5 and UFC's 4, that already leaves 18 pay-per-view dates in 1995 as a bare minimum already on the schedule. Add to that the possibility of 1 or 2 AAA and/or UWF pay-per-views, and WCW producing its own competing UFC show leaves the schedule with as many as 23 pay-per-view events, roughly one every 2 weeks. This isn't necessarily 23 competing events, since many are more indirect than direct competition with one another because they appeal to different audience bases, but there is a significant overlapping audience for all wrestling slash and shoot combat with wrestling-oriented pay-per-view shows. For WCW, pay-per-view is the main cash cow, with shows of late grossing anywhere from $1.3 million to $2.5 million for the 2 Hogan Flair events, making them the most profitable part of the company and really the only thing keeping WCW from literally somewhere in the $10 million range in annual losses. The question lies at what point is oversaturation, and at what point does running too many shows start to kill the golden goose? After a few years of consistently declining buy rates within the industry, the declines have leveled off over the past 2 years for both WWF and WCW. Newcomers to the market, UFC in particular, have done shockingly well even without anywhere near the level of mass marketing and television exposure. Even the AAA pay-per-view show, which in many ways was poorly marketed and had limited television exposure outside of Galavision cable, was marginally profitable and drew primarily an English-speaking audience, leaving only the UWF shows as the only ones that didn't generate hundreds of thousands of dollars. In addition, for ECW to accomplish its goals and be a legitimate force in wrestling, it also has to build its audience base up to the point it can do regular profitable pay-per-view events. By raising the list price of its biggest events from $24.95 to $27.50, and up to $32.50 the day of the show, and increasing from 7 to 9 events, WCW obviously believes its core of probably more than 100,000 regular buyers will continue to order every show. With the price increase starting with the March 19th show, and if the base audience stays loyal and orders every show, it'll bring the company that much closer to financial solvency. The other big winner out of the deal is Hulk Hogan if the buy rates average in 0.7 in 1995. Considering a probable late-year feud with Randy Savage following the current Vader issue and mixing in the tag matches with Flair, that may be a conservative estimate. If Hogan were to work all 9 pay-per-view events in 1995, my guess is he'd probably end up missing 1 or 2, and they average the 0.7, his percentage would be a whopping $4.46 million, and that doesn't include house show money, merchandising or 900 line revenue. Keep in mind that is a conservative estimate. Most likely WCW is correct in this thinking, as price increases haven't seemed to affect buys whatsoever. WWF does more buys for its highest-priced events, WrestleMania and SummerSlam, than its other 3. WCW showed no decline in buys above that of what the industry as a whole was going through during its declining years when it raised the price from $19.95 to $24.95 around 1992. I'm sure the AAA show would have done almost exactly the same number of buys at $24.95 if that was the price instead of $19.95. UFC raised its price from $14.95 to $19.95 for its most recent show, and yet the effect of the price increase was that orders increased from about 145,000 to 205,000, and I'd suspect that another price increase to $24.95 as the group gets more established will do nothing to keep its audience from purchasing the shows. Ultimately, economics dictates there is a saturation point, but hardcore wrestling fans have proven to be pretty loyal when it comes to ordering pay-per-view events, and companies have gotten better and better at marketing the shows. Compared to buying tickets and paying for parking and food for most major sports or entertainment events at major arenas, a $27.50 price tag for a major entertainment show is actually quite inexpensive by today's standards if you get a great show for your money. Of course, for some of the recent pay-per-view shows, free would be overpriced. Although no final decision has been made one way or the other, by adding the two pay-per-view shows, it certainly lessens the possibility of WCW producing two IIWC pay-per-view shows in 1995. As of right now, there is a proposal for a June AAA pay-per-view show produced by WCW. However, as the schedule falls, the AAA pay-per-view show would be on either June 4th or June 11th, which would create a conflict since the WCW show would have to be on either June 11th or June 25th, since WWF already has King of the Ring solidified on June 18th from Philadelphia and UFC is running June 23rd, which would make it a tremendous glut during that month. Even those within WCW are acknowledging that while the AAA pay-per-view idea isn't a dead one right now, by WCW adding pay-per-view dates, it decreases the incentive of them wanting to produce and promote pay-per-view dates for anyone else. Ironically, if the AAA/IWC/WCW deal falls through, Semaphore Entertainment Group, which are the behind-the-scenes promoters of UFC, are the group most likely to take over producing the AAA events. A lot when it comes to the future of AAA, at least short-term in the United States, should be ironed out this coming week because of meetings scheduled to finalize house show and pay-per-view dates for the April through June period. After the Super Brawl pay-per-view on February 19 in Baltimore with the first Hogan Vader meeting, WCW has pay-per-view dates scheduled for March 19 in Tupelo, Mississippi, WCW Uncensored, and May 21 in St. Petersburg, Florida, Slamboree. Baltimore has a possibility of doing 10,000 paid, which would make the first WCW show to hit that mark since 1989. The only WCW shows to have drawn more than 10,000 paid were two 1989 shows headlined by Ric Flair vs. Terry Funk. The Tupelo card will feature a Hogan-Vader strap match rematch, Sting vs. Big Bubba, Randy Savage vs. Avalanche, Harlem Heat vs. Nasty Boys in a tornado match for the tag team title, Boxer vs. Wrestler with Johnny B. Bad vs. Arnold Anderson, Dustin Rhodes vs. Blacktop Bully in a match where they will be doing the match in the back of a large truck, and Jim Duggan vs. Meng in what will be billed as a martial arts challenge. On paper it looks like a weak show as none of the matches look to be sure bets to be good, and really only the top two matches look likely to be good, with Harlem Heat Nasties having possibilities, Bad vs. Arn being questionable because of the gimmick. Rhodes vs. Bully could either be great or horrible depending upon the limitations of the gimmick. Savage vs. Avalanche looks bad and Duggan vs. Meng looks real bad. It appears Super Brawl should do better than Starrcade but not as good as the two Hogan-Flair matches on pay-per-view. At least it should, because even with a weak undercard, Vader is a far more marketable opponent for Hulk Hogan than Butcher. In addition, at least based on this market, television advertising for this pay-per-view has increased many times over previous ones. It's impossible to watch any major cable station in this market and not see regular spots for the pay-per-view focusing on Vader as being Hogan's toughest challenge ever, including all over Titan USA Network telecasts, which is a first. That's another factor in the increase of buy rates for the shows involving Hogan, is that the advertising budget has been so much larger, so that also should increase buys. Although the last major show, the January Clash, even with the in-ring debut of Randy Savage, Hogan, and a half-page ad on page 2 of the USA Today Sports section the day of the event, resulted in the same rating as the previous year with none of the above. They are also introducing a new promotional concept for Super Brawl. They are going to run the Sunday main event show live, the last half hour being a simulcast of the pay-per-view pregame show, which they did previously for the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view in Detroit, from Baltimore. But the dark match, which will appear live on television, will be Arnold Anderson vs. Johnny B. Bad for the TV title in a lumberjack match to set up the return in Tupelo, so they'll be running a main event caliber match free to entice viewers that this is what the rest of the show offers, which is an excellent idea. The only items known about the May 21st show other than what was released at the Disney tapings are that they will be inducting several people into the WCW Hall of Fame, which I believe will be Dusty Rhodes, Fritz Von Erich, Dory Funk, Antonio Inoki, and Jim Barnett. While there have been many rumors swirling around regarding Rick Steamboat and that show, there is behind-the-scenes heat currently regarding Steamboat because of either a threatened or filed lawsuit stemming from his termination 10 weeks before the end of his contract when the office found out about his career-ending injury. It's been suggested to think of his career accomplishments and the fact that he's both undeniably deserving and that the promotion has never acknowledged his retirement, but this is the wrestling profession and ultimately most of those in charge live with the attitude of either they are with us or they are against us, and Steamboat in WCW now for that reason falls into the latter category based on that mindset. In addition, the Cruiserweight title tournament, which has been talked about for months, will either have the tournament final or the champions, presumably Brian Pillman, first defense on May 21st. The Cruiserweight tournament, most if not all except the finals of which will be taking place on March 6 in Dothan, Alabama. The date has been continually postponed, and don't be shocked if it is again, because they are just starting to work on getting outside talent and there is a matter of doing it legally proper that takes time, has really turned into a major behind-the-scenes political ballgame. WCW's idea from the start was to bring in several outsiders, particularly wrestlers from foreign countries, to give the title credibility, and also because with the exception of Pillman, there is nobody in the company in that weight division with much credibility and without outsiders turning into the same jobber championship that many former junior heavyweight champions of the 1980s were regarded as. At press time we don't know of any foreigners who were 100% as far as being involved, although they want wrestlers from New Japan and AAA. The only outside actual name we've heard was Coco Ware and maybe Jerry Estrada. ECW and Paul Heyman have decided not to allow any of its talent appear because they aren't interested in talent trading and are insistent on not wanting any of their talent appearing on WWF or WCW television or PPVs. This eliminates the most viable North American outsiders, Sabu, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Too Cold Scorpio, the first two of whom I know were seriously considered and the latter two which should have been, although I don't know for a fact if they were. There may be political problems regarding Scorpio being brought back even for just a few dates since he was fired over a series of drug test positives, although given the company's recent actions regarding lack of testing and Frank Anderson, that would be hypocritical. In the case of Benoit, who if he had entered would no doubt have been pushed at least to the semifinals, or had been saved for a pay-per-view program, he has turned it down. I don't know what the status is of Sabu, who has been offered a spot on the May 21st show in the Cruiserweight title match and I don't believe had either accepted or turned it down at press time. Heyman was adamant about not using Sabu, who is generally considered the group's single biggest star, if he were to agree to work for WCW in the tournament or on pay-per-view. WCW has also tried to get two wrestlers from AAA, but at press time that deal isn't definite either, with time running out on decision-making and AAA having a much-deserved reputation of having time run out before deals get done. Rick and Scott Steiner, who were originally scheduled to debut on the March 19 pay-per-view, will have their debut moved back to the as-yet unnamed June pay-per-view. The apparent reason is that for WCW to use them effectively, since they'll probably come in with a high price tag, would be in a tag team title program, which would mean at this point with Harlem Heat. Because of their status in Japan, which is their prime bread and butter, and reputations and the lack thereof of the current WCW tag champs, while using the term impossible would be too strong, it would be difficult to get the Steiners to do a job for Heat, and WCW felt, and correctly so, that it wouldn't be in their best interest to do a pay-per-view program where their own champions would look bad and never get a win at the end against non-regulars. In addition, it would mean cutting off the main thrust of the program with Nasty Boys after next week's show. At its weekend house shows in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, WWF confirmed what had already been reported, that those two cities would be the site of King of the Ring, June 18, and SummerSlam, August 28, which will be the next shows in each of those cities. Tickets for both shows should be available now through the ticket office at the Spectrum and Civic Center respectively. Survivor Series is scheduled at this point for the Pond in Anaheim, November 22, although no tickets are available that far in advance. There was a major article in the March Details magazine, which hit the newsstands last week, on last year's UFC 3 tournament, with much of the focus of the article on Ken Shamrock and also Royce Gracie and the family legend. It's probably the best mainstream article focusing on a pro wrestler, Shamrock, in years, giving Shamrock's life background and claiming that Shamrock has become almost obsessive about wanting another chance at Royce Gracie since losing their first meeting in November 1993. The article said that Shamrock used to wrestle for the WWF, which is incorrect, although perhaps the author confused WWF as to be all-inclusive to pro wrestling and said that Shamrock learned to pull punches there but left one with the impression that Pancrase wrestling was legitimate. The article also corrected the misconception about the Gracie legacy, noting that Relio Gracie, Royce's father, in fact did lose twice to others in jiu-jitsu, once against the world champion who was brought from Japan for a match with him and who outweighed Gracie by 70 pounds, although the family has never lost a mixed match according to legend. In addition, a 15-minute feature on NBC Dateline is scheduled for sometime within the next 2 weeks and may have already taken place by the time you're reading this. The April 7th pay-per-view show from Charlotte's Independence Arena has had its lineup finalized, much of which has already been reported here. Besides the Gracie vs. Shamrock main event, there will be the 8-man tournament. Tournament first place prize money was decreased from $64,000 to $50,000 this time, I guess because the purse to Gracie and Shamrock on top combined reportedly will top $100,000, and 4 alternates doing a tournament of their own. The tournament lineup consists of Larry Curtin, kickboxing, Andy Anderson, taekwondo 5th degree black belt, Todd Medina, Jeet Kune Do, the style invented by Bruce Lee, a 265-pound powerlifter/martial artist who was picked by the Federation to be their representative, Hubert Numra, 6'5", 275, a Germany Muay Thai kickboxer who was second in the 1994 Iron Gladiators, an annual Soviet freestyle fighting event similar to UFC, Steve Jenham, UFC 3 champion, Dan Severn, pro wrestler who may be NWA heavyweight champion by the time this show rolls around and who gave Royce Gracie the toughest match of his career in UFC 4. Final, Joe Charles, 6'1", 265, California State Heavyweight Judo champion, and the favorite Oleg Toktarov, the 1994 Soviet Senior Sambo, submission, champion and winner of the 1993 and 1994 Iron Gladiators tournament. The lightest man in the tournament is Jenham at about 215 pounds, unlike previous tournaments that have involved many under 200 pounds. The 4 alternates are Dane Beneteau, 1988 Canadian Olympic hopeful in amateur wrestling and national judo champion, Aspel Concio, Wing Chun, John Hess, 6'7", 290, Kung Fu, and Joel Sutton, Kung Fu. They will do their own mini-tournament based on needs so that if a fighter in the regular tournament that has won a match is injured and can't continue, the alternate will have had as many fights that day as whomever the opponent in the regular tournament has had. The 3-hour pay-per-view will have somewhere between 8 and 11 matches depending upon injuries and time constraints. Shamrock, current Pancrase World Heavyweight Champion, who after UFC 3 had said he wouldn't do another UFC tournament but would return anytime for a singles match with Gracie, has agreed that in the event he should beat Gracie, which would have to be considered a major upset, he'll appear in a singles match main event against whomever wins the tournament on June 23, which is the date of the subsequent pay-per-view. UFC has contacted or been contacted by at least 3 pro wrestlers, all of whom compete in UWF style in Japan, in regard to future tournaments. Bart Vale, PWFG, was contacted about being in this show but hasn't shown interest. Gary Albright, UWF, was also contacted but the holdback if he were to want to do it, and fight promoter Art Davey considered Albright to be marketable enough that they'd consider allowing him to bypass the tournament and go right into the main event as the challenger for the champion spot, would be that he's under an exclusive contract with UWF, which may or may not approve of him doing this since they originally didn't want Dan Severn involved. Since Severn wasn't under an exclusive contract with them, he did it against their wishes and pretty much saved face for them in doing so after the embarrassment a few weeks earlier with Yoji Angio and Rickson Gracie. The other is Steve Nelson, UWF, who placed second in the world in Sambo wrestling at the 1994 championships and isn't under an exclusive UWF contract and contacted the UFC promotion and is under consideration for UFC VI in June. Promoters have also talked about Pancrase wrestlers Minoru Suzuki and Jason DeLucia, Shamrock's training partner in Lodi, California, who appeared in UFC 2, winning his first match before losing easily to Gracie in the second round, as being future participants. UFC also has tentative pay-per-view dates booked on September 15 and December 15. As mentioned last week, WCW is in the discussion stage of running its own UFC-style pay-per-view show, presumably trying to use a member of the Gracie family as the prime draw. Presumably this pay-per-view will differ structurally from UFC as to favor striking fighters and more kickboxing as opposed to mat wrestling, by being held in a traditional boxing/wrestling ring and allowing rope breaks with the fighters being put back on their feet at that point, and having the fighters wear gloves to protect their knuckles, allowing multiple punches to be a more effective weapon as opposed to UFC fights which are dominated by ground fighters since there are no rope breaks and a larger fighting area. The all-time recorded world record for a pro wrestling event may be in jeopardy as part of Antonio Inoki's combining with the government of North Korea to produce a show on either April 28 or April 30 at 150,000-seat Mayday Stadium. Even though the event is only a little more than 2 months away, very little is known about the show other than New Japan will be heavily involved and that negotiations are almost finalized for WCW to be a major part of it, and that All Japan Women is scheduled to send them a match between Akira Hokuto and Bull Nakano. As is well known, the presumed All record was set on March 29, 1987 for the Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant match, which sold out the Pontiac Silverdome, claimed to be 93,000 fans, but other sources who would know pegged the real figure at 78,000. Inoki originally wanted to oppose George Foreman in the main event on the show, however that was prior to Foreman winning the boxing heavyweight title, which took him out of the realm of possibility of being involved as a participant in pro wrestling. The latest on the weekly pro wrestling show on April 2 at the Tokyo Dome is that they've abandoned the idea of having foreign promotions as part of the show. Originally both ECW and WCW were contacted, but the promoters decided after getting 13 different Japanese promotions to agree to participate that anything else would be added unnecessary expense that won't sell any additional tickets and from a time frame would be overkill. Because all the promotions are going to want to be the one to steal the spotlight, it is believed most matches will be 15 to 20 minutes in length, and with ceremonies, intermissions and other festivities, they don't want the thing to turn into a marathon like the All Japan Women's show in November. Approximately 18,000 tickets have been sold for the show, even though none of the matches have been announced. Although not announced, both Atsushi Onita, in an electrified barbed wire match, and Akira Maeda will do singles matches that are expected to be the top drawing matches on the show. Groups involved are New Japan, All Japan, not 100% confirmed at press time but expected, rings, Maeda singles match, UWFI, Pancrase, PWFG, All Japan Women, a tag match involving its top 4 workers, JWP, LLPW, FMW, Onita gimmick match, Michinoku Pro, typical 6-man lucha libre main event with Great Sasuke, Super Delphin, etc., Go Gundam and Diva, 6-man tag match featuring Terry Funk. Gene Okerlund's Hotline tease on February 4 involving the death of a 45-year-old former heavyweight champion wrestler became an even hotter topic as the week went on. As mentioned last week, the tease, which resulted in an all-time non-special event record for the Hotline, reportedly grossing in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $75,000, a typical Saturday Hotline gross is $5,000 to $6,000, came under criticism from almost all quarters for its sleaziness, even in an industry where sleazy is considered part and parcel. Even more that what was mentioned last week is that Okerlund never mentioned Jerry Blackwell's name as the wrestler who had died until 5 minutes into his Hotline message. It also touched off a rumor within the Carolinas that Ric Flair had died. TBS internally, despite the record revenue, came down and gave word that deaths could not in the future be used as Hotline teases on television. Okerlund himself was forced to apologize on the Hotline the following week, although those who listened claimed it came off as insincere, claiming he'd never used the death of a friend. Blackwell and Okerlund worked together 1979-83 in the American Wrestling Alliance when Okerlund first made his name in wrestling, to make money, and then referred to Blackwell as a former American Wrestling Alliance heavyweight champion, actually tag team champion, which actually was part of some of the heat within wrestling circles. Okerlund on television referring to the 45-year-old deceased individual as a former heavyweight champion, to the best of my knowledge never saying world heavyweight champion, was construed by an awful lot of people as meaning a former world heavyweight champion, which is a select grouping of which Blackwell wouldn't have been a part, and said that others on the Hotline should also apologize for reporting that Jesse Ventura was going to WWF as an announcer on Raw as a fact, when he said as a fact that wasn't going to happen, forgetting that he himself many weeks earlier had reported Ventura being on the way to Titan. Results: 117 Mexico City Arena Coliseo, EMLL, La Sombrita and Mascarada Magica Biciclanchita Ramirez and Damian Cito El Guerrero, Supremo 2 and Nueva Links and Kundra B Ultimatum and Mestizo and Filoso, Astro Jr. and Tornado Negro I and Halcon Negro Jr. B Olympico and Solar 2 and Chicago Express, Ringo Mendoza and Elijo del Solitario and Blue Demon Jr. B Elijo del Gladiador and Moger and Mocho Cota, Brazo de Oro and El Texano and Silver King B Gran Marcus Jr. and Jacques Made and Black Magic. 127 Hershey, Pennsylvania, WWF, Aldo Montoya B Quang, Mabel B IRS, Smoking Guns B Well Done, King Kong Bundy B Davey Boy Smith, IC Title, Razor Ramon B Jeff Jarrett DQ, Bret Hart B Owen Hart. 127 Carretero, AAA/Pro Mel, 5,500 Sellout, Angel Mortal and Marabunta B Aguila del Acero and Slayer, Martha Villalobos and Neftali and Vicky Carranza B. La Sirenita and Janet and Lola Gonzalez, Super Astro and Volador and Transformer B. Blue Panther and Jerry Estrada and Fuerza Guerrera, Cien Caras and Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000 B. Los Villanos 3 and 4 and VDQ, La Parca and Cibernetico and El Hijo del Santo and Tinieblas Sr. B. Con and El Barbaro and Eddie Guerrero and El Signo and Negro Navarro. 127 Tamiyaka, All Japan Women, 1130, Yukishina B. Misae Watanabe, Yoko Takahashi B. Nobuendo, Tomoko Watanabe and Yoshiko Tamura B. Kumiko Maekawa and Chaparita Osari, Etsuko Mita and Suzuka Minami B. Kaoru Ito and Mariko Yoshida, Takako Inoue B. Ritamata, Asia Kong and Minami Toyota and Yumiko Hata B. Tashio Yamada and Kyoko Inoue and Mima Shimoda. 127 Netsa Wall Coyote, UWA, Blackbirds 1 and 2 B. Los Migras 1 and 2, Los Comandantes 1 and 2 B. Azor and Alasta Fuego, Los Moicanos 1 and 2 and Adrian El Exotico B. Takeda and Tiger Volador and Black Shadow 2, Nuevo Aldos and Condor Man and Paris D. El Bronco and Taraco and Rocky Santana, Samurai and Redador and Mr. Jack B. Kinnick and Principe Maya and Arrow Flash. 128 Shoshi, All Japan Women, 1240, Yoko Takahashi B. Naomi Kato, Yukishina B. Yoshiko Tamura, Kumiko Maekawa and Ritamata B. Chaparita Osari and Misae Watanabe, Asia Kong and Yumiko Hata and Mariko Yoshida B. Suzuka Minami and Etsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda, Tashio Yamada B. Tomoko Watanabe, Takako Inoue and Kyoko Inoue B. Minami Toyota and Kaoru Ito. 128 Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Central States Wrestling Alliance, 138, J.W. Thunder B. Matt Taylor, Terry Anthony B. Rick Diamond, Bubba Baker B. Rick Dustery, Shadow Warriors Ker Lunatic and Stud, Malaki Manson B. Jack Daniels, Night Warrior 1 Rumble Royal. 129 Hyogo, J.W.P., Takahashi D. Itakaki, Riko Amano B. Kobayashi, Hiro Misugo and Tomoko Miyaguchi B. Sumio Toyama and Tomoko Kuzumi, 1 count pinfall matches, Hiro Miyagi B. Fuseo Naochi, Dynamite Kansai B. Yagi, Kansai NC Mayumi Ozaki, Devil Masami B. Cutie Suzuki, Hikari Fukuoka B. Masami, Fukuoka D. Kandi Akutsu, Kansai and Masami and Akutsu and Naochi D. Ozaki and Suzuki and Fukuoka and Yagi. 130 Himeji, Eva, 1150, Yoki Kimi B. Tomoe Raya, Taisuke Tao B. Yoshihiro Tajiri, Cynthia Moreno B. Akaimiki, Crypt Keeper B. Aguila Negra, Iceman, Ricky Santana, and Takashi Okano B. Jiraiya and Miguel Perez, Eva title, Dick Slater B. Nobutaka Araya 2006. 130 Osaka, JWP, Anya D. Takahashi, Kobayashi B. Itakaki, Riko Amano and Sumio Toyama B. Tomoko Kuzumi and Tomoko Miyaguchi, Dynamite Kansai and Cutie Suzuki and Hiromi Suga B. Devil Masami and Hiro Miyagi and Fuseo Naochi 2254, Mayumi Ozaki and Hikari Fukuoka B. Chigusa Nagayo and Kandi Akutsu. 131 Wakayama, JWP, Anya D. Itakaki, Sumio Toyama B. Fuseo Naochi, Kandi Akutsu and Tomoko Kuzumi and Tomoko Miyaguchi B. Hiro Misugo and Takahashi and Riko Amano, Cutie Suzuki B. Hiro Miyagi, Dynamite Kansai and Mayumi Ozaki B. Devil Masami and Hikari Fukuoka. February 1 Aguas Calientes, AAA, 7,500 sellout, prelim results unavailable, Irma Gonzalez and Irma Aguilar and La Sirenita B. Martha Villalobos and La Briosa and Shitara DQ, Bali and Sugar Eva and Tornado B. Pimpinela Escarlata and Mr. Condor and Angel Mortal, Mexican Trios titles, Los Payasos B. Tony Arce and Volcano and Rocco Valente, Mascarano Das Mil and Heavy Metal and Jerry Estrada and Eddie Guerrero B. Pero Aguayo and Octagon and Latin Lover and La Parca DQ. February 4 Mineral Wells Texas, Texas All-Star and Texas Outlaw Promotions, 235, Chuck West B. Tony Glenn DQ, / B. Mr. Mystique, Bruiser Bennett B. Jason the 13th, Rico Suave, B. Dalton B. Pro Mask No. 1, Glenn, Suave and James Rapp D. American Force, Spike B. Lucifer Hades DQ. February 5 Misato, JWP, Kobayashi D. Anya, Tomoko Kuzumi and Riko Amano B. Tomoko Miyaguchi and Takahashi, Kandi Akutsu and Sumio Toyama B. Fuseo Naochi and Hiro Misugo, Mayumi Ozaki B. Hiro Miyagi, Dynamite Kansai and Cutie Suzuki B. Devil Masami and Hikari Fukuoka. February 6 Okazaki, FMW, 3,458 sellout, Hido B. Masato Tanaka, Battle Ranger and Ray Pandita B. Maka Hayato and Koji Nakagawa, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga B. Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Megumi Kudo and Nurse Nakamura and Combat Toyota B. Shark Tsuchiya and Crusher Maidamari and Killer Iwam, Independent Junior title, Hideki Hasaka B. Riki Fuji to win title, Tarzan Goto B. Hisakatsu Oya 2106, Barbed Wire Street Fight Bunkhouse Match, Yukihiro Kanemura and the Gladiator and Mr. Pogo B. Atsushi Onita and Katsutoshi Niyama and Mr. Genasuke. February 6 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, War, 2100 Sellout, Yuji Yasurioka B. Hector Garza, Osamu Tashi Hikari B. Yasurioka, Ultimate Dragon, Brett Como, B. Garza, Das Karas and Ultimate Dragon B. Ultimo Dragon and Masanobu Kurisu, Animal Hamaguchi and Ryumago B. Kim Duke and Warlord DQ, Koki Kitahara B. Hiroshi Itakura, Perry Saturn and John Coronas, USWA Eliminators, B. Lionheart and Nobukazu Harai, non-title, Geto and Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki B. Shiro Koshi Naka and Tatsutoshi Goto and Mishi Har 2601. February 7 Hirosaki, New Japan, 3500 Sellout, Tokumitsu Ishizawa B. Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Osamu Kido B. Black Cat, Dean Malenko and Koji Kanemoto B. Yuji Nagata and El Samurai, El Higante B. Tada Yasuda, Akira Nagami and Takayuki Izuka B. Gran Hamada and Norio Oniga, Mike Enos B. Keiji Muto, Masachono and Hiro Saito B. Shina Hashimoto and Manabu Nakanishi, Masa Saito and Kensuke Sasaki and Hiroyoshi Tenzan B. Scott Norton and Ron Simmons and Two Cold Scorpio. February 8 Atlanta Center Stage, WCW Saturday Night Taping, 785 Sellout / all freebies, non-squash results, Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma B. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton 2 stars, Roma B. Tim Horner, Harlem Heat B. Scott Armstrong and Mike Davis, WCW TV title, Arnold Anderson D. Johnny B. Bad. February 8 Sendai, New Japan, 6000 Sellout, Yuji Nagata B. Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Black Cat B. Tokumitsu Ishizawa, Mike Enos B. Tada Yasuda, El Samurai and Koji Kanemoto B. Dean Malenko and Norio Oniga, Osamu Kido and Masa Saito B. Ron Simmons and Two Cold Scorpio, Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Kensuke Sasaki B. Takayuki Izuka and Manabu Nakanishi, Hiroshi Hayes and Junji Hirata B. Hiro Saito and Masa Chono, Gran Hamada B. Shinjiro Otani, Great Muta B. El Higante, non-title, Scott Norton B. Shina Hashimoto. February 8 Takamatsu, FMW, 3226 Sellout, Hisakatsu Oya and Hideki Hasaka B. Masato Tanaka and Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Ray Pandita and Battle Ranger B. Gasaku Goshigawara and Maka Hayato, Nurse Nakamura and Shark Tsuchiya and Crusher Maidamari B. Yoshika Ishikura and Megumi Kudo and Combat Toyota, Yukihiro Kanemura and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga B. Tarzan Goto and Koji Nakagawa, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Atsushi Onita and Katsutoshi Niyama and Mr. Genasuke B. Hideki Hasaka and Mr. Pogo and the Gladiator. February 8 Osaka, War, 1400 Sellout, Ultimate Dragon B. Hector Garza, Warlord B. Osamu Tashi Hikari, Ryumago B. Hiroshi Itakura, Das Karas B. Yuji Yasurioka, Animal Hamaguchi B. Masanobu Kurisu, Perry Saturn and John Cronus B. Lionheart and Kim Duke, Cage Match, Ultimo Dragon and Nobukazu Harai and Koki Kitahara B. Geto and Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki 2948. February 8 Kasaoka, All Japan Women, 1780, Nobuendo B. Naomi Kato, Yoko Takahashi and Yoshiko Tamura B. Misae Watanabe and Yuko Shina, Ritamata B. Kumiko Maekawa, Tomoko Watanabe B. Chaparita Sari, Suzuka Minami and Toshio Yamada B. Etsuko Mita and Yumiko Hata, Minami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida and Kaoru Ito B. Asia Kong and Mima Shimoda and Kyoko Inoue. February 8 Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Carolina Wrestling Federation, 303, Bam Bam Colson B. Kevin Reed, Agent Steel B. Johnny Dollars, Dark Star B. Johnny Blair, Gentleman James B. Unforgiven, Mark Ash B. DC Rothrock, Star 1 Battle Royal. February 9 Columbia, South Carolina, WCW, 2000, Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot B. Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma, Alex Wright B. Bobby Eaton, Johnny B. Bad B. Steve Regal, WCW Tag Titles, Harlem Heat B. Nasty Boys DQ, Sting B. Avalanche DQ, U.S. Title, Vader B. Jim Duggan. February 9 Suikaido, New Japan, 1500, Dean Malenko B. Black Cat, Norio Oniga and Gran Hamada B. Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Shinjiro Otani, Akira Nagami B. El Samurai, Handicap Match, El Higante B. Manabu Nakanishi and Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Masachono and Hiro Saito B. Yuji Nagata and Junji Hirata, Osamu Kido and Takayuki Izuka B. Koji Kanemoto and Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Kensuke Sasaki B. Mike Enos, Hiroshi Hazen Masa Saito and Shina Hashimoto B. Scott Norton and Ron Simmons and 2 Cold Scorpio. February 9 Onomichi, FMW, 2763, Riki Fuji B. Haido, Ray Pandita and Battle Ranger B. Maka Hayato and Gazakugo Shigawara, Crusher Mai Damari and Shark Tsuchiya and Killer Iwam B. Megumi Kudo and Combat Toyota and Yoshika Ishikura, Hisakatsu Oya and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Yukihiro Kanemura B. Tarzan Goto and Koji Nakagawa and Tetsuhiro Kuroda, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Atsushi Onita and Katsutoshi Niyama and Masato Tanaka B. Mr. Pogo and the Gladiator and Hideki Hasaka. February 10 Pittsburgh, WWF, 5075, Aldo Montoya B. Quang 2.5 stars, WWF Women's Title, Bull Nakano B. Alundra Blaze 3 3/4 stars, Shawn Michaels B. Davey Boy Smith 2.5 stars, IC Title, Razor Ramon B. Jeff Jarrett DQ 3.5 stars, Bob Holly B. Jimmy Del Rey 1 3/4 stars, Smoking Guns B. Well Done 2.5 stars, Lex Luger B. Tatanka, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart. February 10 Florence, South Carolina, WCW, 2700, Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot B. Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma, Alex Wright B. Bobby Eaton, Johnny B. Bad B. Steve Regal, WCW Tag Titles, Harlem Heat B. Nasty Boys DQ, Sting B. Avalanche DQ, U.S. Title, Vader B. Jim Duggan. February 10 Lake City, Tennessee, SMW, 200, Loser Eats Dog Food, Boo Bradley B. Chris Condito, Robert Gibson B. Unabomb DQ, Dirty White Boy B. Buddy Landell DQ, Gangstas B. Tracy Smothers and Scott Armstrong. February 10 Shimono Seki, FMW, 2810 Sellout, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga B. Riki Fuji, Battle Ranger and Ray Pandita B. Gasakugo Shigawara and Maka Hayato, Killer Iwam and Shark Tsuchiya and Crusher Mai Damari B. Yoshika Ishikura and Combat Toyota and Megumi Kudo, Yukihiro Kanemura and Hisakatsu Oya B. Koji Nakagawa and Tarzan Goto, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight, Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Masato Tanaka and Katsutoshi Niyama and Atsushi Onita B. Haido and Hideki Hasaka and the Gladiator and Mr. Pogo. February 10 Wakayama, WAR, Ultimate Dragon D. Yuji Yasarioka, Ultimo Dragon B. Hector Garza, Animal Hamaguchi and Ryu Magobi Masanobu Kurisu and Osamu Tashi Hikari, Koki Kitahara B. Kim Duke DQ, Perry Saturn and John Cronus B. Lionheart and Hiroshi Itakura, Cage Match, Geto and Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki B. Daskaris and Warlord and Nobukazu Hirai. February 10 Tokyo Karakuen Hall, LLPW, Leo Kitamura B. Aono, Gen Yukari B. Michika Nagashima, Japanese Tag Title, Carol Midori and Michiko Omukai B. Mikiko Futagami and Mizuki Endo 2142, Shinobu Kandori and Rumi Kazama B. Noriyo Tadano and Harley Saito, Eagle Sawai B. Miki Handa. February 10 Calgary, Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling, Jason Helton B. Fernando Valentino, Steve Rivers B. Super Kungo to win North American Mid-HWT title, Steve Wild and Black Bart B. Steve Gillespie and Freeze to win North American Tag titles, Mike Anthony, Mike Lazansky, B. Jerry Morrow DQ, Johnny Smith B. Rick Titan, FMW Big Titan, DQ. February 10 Washington, North Carolina, All-Star Wrestling, Mike Justice B. James Ivy, Giant Kimala 2 B. Jim Steele, Rob Van Dam B. Gorgeous George III, Robbie Eagle, Cactus Jack B. Super Vader, Walter McDonald. February 10 Fort Wayne, Indiana, Windy City Wrestling, 50, Sonny Rogers B. The Terminator, Steve Boz B. Brian Anderson, not SMW Wrestler, Brett Sanders Dker Mike Anthony, not Mike Lazansky, Larry Larson B. Ripper Manson DQ, Steve Regal, former American Wrestling Alliance Wrestler, B. Danny Dominion, Wrecking Crew and Frank Melson and Christopher Daniels B. Texas Hangman and Jr. February 10 Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Jimmy Sharp D. Scotty Fernandez, Ken Arden B. Big Bubba, Sam Colt and Frankie Lee B. Roger Sartain and New One Man Gang DQ, Colt B. Sweet Brown Sugar DQ, Chuck Colt and John Humphrey and Rick Justice B. Mark Payne and Blazing Fury and Black Terminator. February 11 Scranton, Pennsylvania, WWF, 2500 Sellout, Kama B. Quang, Bushwhackers B. Heavenly Bodies, WWF Women's Title, Bull Nakano B. Alundra Blaze, IC Title, Jeff Jarrett B. Razor Ramon DQ, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart, Shawn Michaels B. Davey Boy Smith. February 11 White Plains, New York, WWF, 2200, Man Mountain Rock B. Mike Bell, Mabel B. Tony DeVito, Hakushi B. Aldo Montoya, Doink the Clown B. Brooklyn Brawler, Smoking Guns B. Executioner No. 1 and Bell, King Kong Bundy B. Atom Bomb, Blue Brothers Gearhead Shrinkers, Cage Match, Lex Luger B. Tatanka. February 11 Morristown, Tennessee, SMW, 450, Loser Eats Dog Food, Boo Bradley B. Chris Condito, Robert Gibson B. Unabomb DQ, No DQ Match, Buddy Landell B. Dirty White Boy, Gangstas DDQ Tracy Smothers and Scott Armstrong. February 11 Izuka, FMW, 3398 Sellout, Ricky Fujibi Hido, Ray Pondita and Gasaku Goshigawara B. Maka Ayato and Battle Ranger, Megumi Kudo and Combat Toyota and Yoshika Ishikura B. Nurse Nakamura and Killer Iwam and Shark Tsuchiya, Mitsuhiro Matsunaga and Hisakatsu Oya B. Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Tarzan Goto, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Atsushi Onita and Katsutoshi Niyama and Koji Nakagawa and Masato Tanaka B. Mr. Pogo and the Gladiator and Hideki Hasaka and Yukihiro Kanemura. February 11 Yuji, WAR, Yuji Yasuroka B. Masanobu Kurisu, Hiroshi Itakura B. Kim Duke DQ, Das Caras B. Hector Garza, Perry Saturn and John Cronus B. Osamu Tashi Hikari and Lionheart, Ultimate Dragon B. Ultimo Dragon Core, Koki Kitahara B. Warlord, Cage Match, Geto and Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki B. Nobukazu Harayan Ryumago and Animal Hamaguchi 2030. February 11 I Wait, Michinoku Pro, 800, Takamichi no Kudino Hirohoshikawa, Masato Yakashiji Kuryone Jinjin, Great Sasuke B. Hanzo Nakajima. February 11 Dallas, NWA, 300, Bo Vegas B. Vitor Mussolini, Randy Rhodes B. Tracy Austin, Scott Putski B. Mike Davis, Sam Houston B. Rod Price Core, Bull Rope Match, Black Bart B. Dick Murdoch, North American Title, Tony Norris B. John Hawk DQ. February 11 Kanagawa, Iwu, 300 Sellout, Mixed Match, Zulima and Kishin Kawabata B. Electra and Ryo Maike, Shun Matsuzaki and Kate Tsukata B. Takeshi Miyamoto and Kikuzawa, Daemonio 1 and 2 B. Masahiko Takasugi and Okamura, Poison Sawada and Uchu Power X and Goro Tsurumi B. Daemonio I and Black Mummy and Mummy. February 11 Chatsworth, Georgia, TWA, Chuck Colt B. Joey Funk, Frankie Lee B. Outpatient, Craig Ward and Sam Colt B. Samurai Dragons, Jimmy Sharp and New One Man Gang B. Adrian Champagne and Larry Blade, Mark Payne and Blazing Fury B. Scotty Fernandez and Wrestling Kid, Jimmy Sharp B. Cold. February 12 Philadelphia, WWF, 5500, Quang B. Kama, Bushwhackers B. Well Done, WWF Women's Title, Bull Nakano B. Alundra Blaze, Duke Dries B. Mantor, Shawn Michaels B. Davey Boy Smith, 123 Kid and Bob Holly B. Heavenly Bodies, Razor Ramon B. Bob Backlund DQ, WWF Title, Diesel B. Jeff Jarrett, Bret Hart B. Owen Hart. February 12 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, New Japan, 1978 Sellout, Black Cat B. Tatsuhito Takaiwa, Takayuki Izuka B. El Samurai, Dean and Joe Malenko B. Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Yuji Nagata, Osamu Kido and Hiroshi Hayes and Manabu Nakanishi B. Ron Simmons and 2 Cold Scorpio and Mike Enos, 9 Title, Gran Hamada B. Nori Iwanaga, Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Masachono and Hiro Saito B. Riki Choshu and Shina Hashimoto and Junji Hirata, Scott Norton B. Kensuke Sasaki. February 12 Tokyo Korakuen Hall, Heisei Shingun, 1879 Sellout, Michiyoshi Ohara B. Isao Takagi, Kengo Kimura and Kunyaki Kobayashi B. Sabu and Tasmaniac, Akatoshi Saito B. Koji Kanemoto, Hiroyoshi Tenzan B. Ohara. February 3 Falls, Shiro Koshinaka and Great Kabuki and Tatsutoshi Goto B. Masa Saito and Yoshiaki Yatsu and Junji Hirata. February 12 Hiroshima, WAR, Yuji Yasurioka B. Hector Garza, Ultimate Dragon B. Masanobu Kurisu, Ryumago B. Hiroshi Itakura, Osamu Tashi Hikari B. Kim Duke DQ, Perry Saturn and John Cronus B. Warlord and Lionheart, NWA Middleweight Title, Ultimo Dragon B. Das Caras, Cage Match, Geto and Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki B. Nobukazu Harayan Koki Kitahara and Animal Hamaguchi. February 12 More, OK, Power Zone Wrestling Alliance, Treach Phillips Jr. B. Rick Valentine, Yankee Rose B. /DQ, Country Boy Kel B. Psycho, Wild Maverick B. Super X, Chopper B. Nightmare DQ, Randy Rhodes DDQ Chains. February 13 Memphis, USWA, 1800, Moondog Spot B. Jim Harris, Crusher Bones B. Moondog Rex, Gorgeous George III B. Ched Carlson, Street Fight, Miss Texas and Scott Stud B. Sweet Georgia Brown and Reggie B. Fine, USWA Tag Title, Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert B. PG-13, Winner Gets Title Shot, Bill Dundee B. Brian Christopher DQ, Unified Title, Jerry Lawler B. Dundee, Lawler and Sid Vicious B. Bones and Big Daddy Cyrus. Special thanks to Bruce Bennett, Dan Paris, Mark Morton, Steve Prozik, Stephen Race, Greg Price, Steve Dr. Lucha Sims, Scott Hudson, Bruce Buchanan, George Snow, Corey Van Klk, Brian Hildebrand, Norm Connors, Jesse Money, Gabe Sapolsky, Peggy Watkins, Marcus Watkins. Japanese Television Rundown 128 All Japan, 1. Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi drew Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao over 60 minutes to retain the PWF World and International Tag titles. The last 22:40 aired on television. There have been better executed matches and matches with more hot moves and even some stiffer matches. But from the standpoint of telling a story and ring psychology, this may have been the best match I've ever seen. If you want to know what it sounds like to hear 4,200 people have a simultaneous orgasm that lasts 15 minutes, you'll have to see this match. Misawa and Kobashi's work as a babyface in this match was unparalleled. 5 stars star. February 4th New Japan, 1. Norton and Enos beat Muto and Tada lurch Yasuda in 12:51 when Enos pinned Yasuda with a power slam. Muto really looked great carrying the match while Lurch looked fairly bad. 3 stars, 2. Choshu and Hirata beat Chono and Hiro Saito in 12:51. Match was better than it sounds because it was fast-paced with a lot of good wrestling. Only weird deal is that Chono and Saito were doing chair shots in the ring right in front of the ref, and since they don't do DQs here, the ref just stood there and did nothing. Saito accidentally kicked Chono and Chono came back with a kick to Saito's face. Saito then grabbed a chair but instead hit both Choshu and Hirata. When Saito missed a senton, backward splash, on Hirata, Chono started stomping on his partner and Hirata came off the top rope with a headbutt on Saito for the pin. 3¼ stars, 3. Tenzan and Sasaki beat Hashimoto and Nakanishi in 14:38 in a surprisingly top-notch match when Tenzan pinned Nakanishi. Hashimoto's timing was perfect and his quickness on his kicks along with stiffness was really impressive for his size. Hashimoto looked like a larger Kawada in this bout and Sasaki has improved greatly since dropping the Power Warrior gimmick. Everyone looked good and this match was stiff and athletic. Focal point was building up Hashimoto vs Tenzan as a singles program. 3¾ stars. February 6th All Japan Women, 1. Tomoko Watanabe and Yumiko Hata beat Suzuka Minami and Chaparita Asari in 11:46. Asari is too small to be taken seriously against Hata and Hata toyed with her and acted as if wrestling her was effortless. Match was all action and hot at the end when Minami and Hata were in with one another. Watanabe pinned Asari with a clothesline. 3¼ stars, 2. Jaguar Yokota pinned Ritamata in 12:01 with a powerbomb and a folding press. Yokota, who is one of the 3 or 4 best women wrestlers of all time but retired back in 1985. She's only 33 now but really light, as in body weight, not in wrestling style, and her style looked outdated even though she still has it athletically. She sold a lot for Tamata making it look competitive, and Tamata is just a prelim wrestler so give her credit for that. 2¾ stars, 3. Asia Kong and Kaoru Ito beat Manami Toyota and Kumiko Maekawa in 1840. Fans aren't into Maekawa yet but she was okay. Toyota was awesome, particularly at the end making diving save after save for Maekawa. Finally Kong gave Toyota the backhand punch knocking her out and Ito pinned Maekawa with a double foot stomp off the top rope. 4¼ stars, 4. Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue and Mariko Yoshida beat Toshio Yamada and Atsuko Mita and Mimishimoto in 1740. Faced past and good execution but there was something missing psychology-wise early. It got great at the end with great near falls, dives, big moves, etc. The last few minutes were super. Kyoko pinned Mita with a Niagara driver. 4 stars. EMLL. The first Arena Mexico show is February 17th going head-to-head with a major AAA show at Juan de la Barrera Gym with a double main of Canek and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Vampiro Canadiense vs Pierroth Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Emilio Charles Jr. and Negro Casas and Ultimo Dragon and Hector Garza vs Bestia Salvaje and Felino and El Satanico. Canek will be in for the next 2 or 3 weeks on Friday and Mil Mascaras will also be brought back, perhaps to feud with Jason the Terrible. Canek walked out of the promotion last September, vacating the CMLL tag title he held with Wagner because he was double-crossed by Silver King, El Texano and Wagner in a tag title match and threw the belt at the booker. In newspaper articles announcing his return, Canek said he has nothing against MLL but he wasn't happy about what took place at the time, but also said he would never leave. UWA President Carlos Maines. With Canek working Arena Mexico, UWA's biggest show of the week that night in Netzahualcoyotl is headlined by debuting a new babyface tag team of Batman and Robin. Galavision on February 11 aired from 1:31 at Arena Coliseo, Brazo de Oro winning the Distrito Federal Heavyweight title from Gran Marcos Jr. in 2021 with a small package in the third fall. Crowd looked around 400, which was horrible. Marcos is outright horrible, but Brazo de Oro, who is the best worker of the family, looked great, even doing a pair of third fall topes. And the psychology was strong, particularly in the third fall. 2 1/4 stars. They also aired the February 3 main event. Crowd was maybe 500, which is still poor for a Friday night show, as Silver King and Hector Garza and La Fiera won 2 out of 3 falls from Emilio Charles Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. on Black Magic. Silver King and Charles were great carrying this match, and Garza, who is green, is showing noticeable improvement week to week as they make him the focal point. Garza pinned Charles in the third, which is a big deal as almost a rookie gained a fall on one of the group's headliner heels, and the match was pretty good, 3 1/4 stars. A magazine article on Brazo Super Porky de Plata, 5'4", 300+ pounds, says that at his last physical he weighed more now than ever before, although no figure was given, and the doctor told Porky that he was overdosing on vitamin T, tacos, tamales, tostadas. A weird news report reminiscent of a few years ago when the AP reported nationally about the death of Gorgeous George, who, before Hulk Hogan, was the most famous American pro wrestler of all time, who had actually died nearly 30 years earlier, but one of his imitations, who claimed to be the original after the original had died, then passed away, and news media around the country reported it as if he were the original, even after being informed that it wasn't, even to the point of claiming that the original took his name from him. Happened last week in Mexico. In the 1960s, the most charismatic wrestler in Mexico was Rayo de Jalisco, Maximo Linares, which is largely why his son was such a big draw a few years ago. In those days, before commissions guarded against this type of behavior, a guy by the name of Felix Espinosa used to work small shows under the name Rayo de Jalisco before he was ordered not to. Anyway, he died last week, and it was reported in many media outlets that Rayo de Jalisco had died, but when the word hit Mexico City, it was quickly dismissed as a fraudulent Rayo that had passed away. The real Rayo is living in Guadalajara and worked some major AAA shows as recently as 1993. The Distrito Federal Commission now has a ruling that no title matches can end in draws. In the event of a draw, as in the form of a double countout, double DQ or double pin, since all title matches in Mexico have no time limit, in the third fall of a title match, the match will be restarted and they'll wrestle a fourth fall. Black Power and Ari Romero, who lost what little hair he had on February 9 to Silver King, who have been working as the Blues Brothers, have added a third member to their team called Black Machine, billed as being from El Salvador, which is interesting since AAA is using Black Santo to feud with Santo and also billing him from El Salvador. AAA. The return to Wanda La Brera Gym is February 17, so it'll go head-to-head with the Arena Mexico opening. Card has Conan and Cibernetico and Latin Lover and Tinieblas Sr. vs. Cien Caras and Blue Panther and Heavy Metal and Angel Blanco Jr., La Parca vs. Jerry Estrada for the Mexican Light Heavyweight title, Los Destructors vs. Los Villanos, Rey Mysterio Jr. and Transformer and Volador vs. Misterioso and Santo Negro and Eddie Guerrero, and winners and Super Calo and El Sagrado, who is supposed to be a great flyer from UWA, vs. Karloff Lagarde Jr. and Pero Silva and Pecudo. Other major show this coming week is February 19 also in Mexico City, with a return Mexican tag title match with Fuerza and Juventud Guerrera defending against Rey Mysterio and Rey Mysterio Jr., Octagon and Parca and Santo vs. Eddie Guerrero and Santo Negro and Psicosis, Angel Mortal and Mr. Condor and Maribunta, Diabolicos, vs. Rudy Reyna and My Flowers and Pimpinela Escarlata, Exoticos, Women and Rookies Underneath. Current plans are to run Tijuana and Mexicali, California border towns, with major shows on February 24 and February 25 and return on March 10 and March 11. Galavision on February 11 aired 2 matches from 127 in Querétaro and will be airing the Rio Nilo February 5 major show this coming week. In the first TV match, Super Astro and Transformer and Volador beat Blue Panther and Fuerza Guerrera and Jerry Estrada in 2 out of 3 falls when Astro pinned Panther clean in the third to set up a Mexican middleweight title match. Considering the talent involved, the match wasn't as great as it sounds, but the flying in the third fall was excellent, with Volador even doing an Asai moonsault where he nearly cleared the guardrail and wound up in the front row and was shaken up. 3.5 stars. The other bout was another Villanos vs Dinamitas match, going 2 straight falls to the Dinamita, both falls by DQ. First fall saw the Villanos DQ'd for triple teaming Universo 2000, who bled and had his mask ripped up. In the second fall, Villano 3 had his mask ripped up and bled as well. The first fall was pretty sloppy, but it turned into a pretty heated brawl by the end, ending when Villano 4 pulled Universo's mask off for another DQ finish. Thus far in the Villanos vs Dinamita feud, which started in January, not one fall has ended with a pinfall, as they earlier had done a 3-fall, with all the falls being on DQ on television, and the cage match was a climb over the top finish. 2.75 stars. They also aired the Rey Mysterio Jr. vs Karloff Lagarde Jr. match from December 2nd in Mexico City. Expect Lagarde, who looked to have some potential but is nowhere near the caliber of Juventud Guerrera, to get a strong push as an underneath tag team with Pero Silva. El Satanico, who is in the lead program in MLL, sent feelers out about returning here, but there is still bitterness over him walking out of a hair versus hair program with Pero Aguayo last year, so it isn't going to happen right now. Especially since the timing of him apparently wanting to jump coincides with what most feel is an upcoming hair versus hair match for MLL with Hector Garza that he'd most likely be losing. On the February 12 Mexico City television, they aired February 1 Aguascalientes. In the key matches, Los Payasos retained the Mexican Trios titles, beating Los Destructors when the challengers had the match going their way and the Clowns switched masks to score the winning pin. After the match, Los Destructors put up their masks for a rematch for the titles on February 5 in Tonalá, which they captured the belts on. Main event was said to be awesome, with Eddie Guerrero and Jerry Estrada and Mascarano 2000 and Heavy Metal vs Octagon and La Parca and Pero Aguayo and Latin Lover. Guerrero gave Octagon a form of the Niagara Driver and then began working on his neck, and they talked about the injury suffered from the pile driver in Los Angeles in November. It wound up with Octagon once again being stretchered out in the early part of the match, but Guerrero knocked him off the stretcher and gave him a suplex on the floor, giving the Rudos the 4-on-3 edge. During the third fall, Octagon returned with a neck brace on and the place went wild. The match finished with something like 7 third-fall dives before Mascarano 2000 fouled Aguayo, who on the way down, fouled him back, but ref Tirantes only called the second foul for the DQ. Parca is becoming the next real big thing in Mexico as a face, because on this show there were lots of kids dressed up in La Parca costumes. They also set up a feud with Los Exoticos vs Los Diabolicos, as Diabolicos Mr. Condor and Angel Mortal teamed with Pimpinela Escarlata, captain of Los Exoticos, in losing a trios match, and after the match Mortal and Condor destroyed Escarlata and left him a bloody mess. In a women's match on the same show, Martha Villalobos lit Los Sirenitas hair on fire to, pardon the pun, heat up their angle. All Japan. The next tour opens February 17 at Korakuen Hall with Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi and Jun Akiyama vs Steve Williams and Johnny Ace and Rob Van Dam. Take one guess who is doing the job there: Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao vs Stan Hansen and Dan Crawford, Takao Mori vs Doug Furnace and Wrecking Crew, former WCW underneath tag team of Al Green and Mark Laurinaitis, vs Samba Asako and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Laurinaitis is the younger brother of Johnny Ace and Road Warrior Animal. The entire tour consists of no special matches except for the final night on March 4 at Budokan, with 3 title bouts: Misawa and Kobashi vs Williams and Ace for the tag title, Kawada vs Hansen for the Triple Crown, and Crawford vs Yoshinari Ogawa for the PWF Junior Heavyweight. The Champion Carnival Singles Tournament Tour will be March 21 to April 15 with the finals at Budokan Hall. February 4 television show did a 2.2 rating. New Japan. They really heated up the original Ishingun, Riki Choshu's army from the early 80s, versus Heisei Ishingun feud on February 12 afternoon show at Korakuen Hall, and gave a monster push to Hiroyoshi Tenzan as the brightest new star in the promotion. The feud actually started at the Tokyo Dome when Masa Saito, the New Japan Television color commentator and former tag partner of Riki Choshu from 10 years ago, said during Shiro Koshinaka's match that Koshinaka's group is just a pale imitation of what we did without the heart, and basically called them New Japan Rejects. The gimmick is that on January 18 when Heisei Shingun's house show was taped for New Japan Television and Saito continued to commentate, Koshinaka tried to get him fired as color commentator, which led to Saito reforming the original Ishingun for a six-man tag on February 12 against Koshinaka and two partners. In addition, Koshinaka asked Tenzan to come to the show because they wanted him to join their promotion. After the opener, Koshinaka came to the ring and said he couldn't find Tenzan backstage or anywhere but wanted him to join their group. Finally Tenzan showed up in street clothes and the two had a stare-down which turned into a wild brawl with Tenzan running him out. Tenzan was then challenged to a match by Michiyoshi Ohara later on the card, which Tenzan won. Main event saw Saito bring Junji Hirata and Yoshiaki Yatsu with him against Koshinaka and Great Kabuki and Tatsutoshi Goto. Koshinaka went berserk because he wanted Riki Choshu on the other side. It wound up with Koshinaka pinning Yatsu in the third fall. After the match, the rest of Ishingun, Kengo Kimura, Ohara, Kuniaki Kobayashi and Akitoshi Saito, hit the ring and started beating on Yatsu. Masa Saito then went berserk and body slammed all seven guys one after another, but eventually they overpowered him when Tenzan made the save. Saito, Yatsu and Hirata all thanked Tenzan. Tenzan then hit Saito and the other two suddenly with his Mongolian chop, double chop to the neck. The seven Ishingun guys all ran in, but Tenzan played Superman and was beating up on all 10 until they finally ganged up and stopped him until, in another surprise, Masa Chono helped out Tenzan. Chono and Tenzan shook hands, basically winding up with a three-sided feud with the New Japan regulars, the Heisei Shingun group and the Chono group with Tenzan and Sabu. New Japan then held a show at 6:30 p.m. that day with Tenzan and Chono and Hiro Saito teaming up to beat Choshu and Shina Hashimoto and Hirata when Tenzan cleanly pinned Choshu in just 5:35. After the match they did a dressing room brawl angle with Chono, Tenzan and Sabu all attacking Hashimoto. After doing his first job ever for Akira Nagami, Keiji Muto did another shocking job in a singles match on February 7 in Hirosaki to Mike Enos, who is getting something of a push. At New Japan's biggest show of the week on February 8 in Sendai, Muto, as Great Muta, used the green mist and a moonsault to get a 1-2-3 on El Gigante, making him probably the only wrestler besides Scott Norton and Undertaker ever to pin Gigante, formerly Giant Gonzalez in WWF. Muto is resting a series of injuries and missed the rest of the tour. Joe Malenko debuted on February 12 at Korakuen Hall teaming with Brother Dean to beat Tokumitsu Ishizawa and Yuji Nagata. All three singles champions dropped non-title matches this past week to set up title matches. In Sendai, UWA Junior Heavyweight Champion Shinjiro Otani lost a non-title to Gran Hamada, while on February 12 Hamada also pinned IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champ Norio Onaga. Also on February 8, IWGP Champ Hashimoto lost a non-title match to Norton's DDT to set up their title match on February 19, and on February 12 Norton used the DDT to pin Kensuke Sasaki. February 4 television show did a 1.6 rating. Other Japan notes. In something of a big surprise, UWF, I announced that the Vader vs Nobuhiko Takada UWF title match will take place on April 20 at Nagoya's Rainbow Hall. It had been presumed this match was going to be held off until May or June at the Fukuoka Dome. Don't know if they've got something else big in the works for Fukuoka Dome, if they've decided against trying to run an 80,000-seat building, or they just want to get the title off Vader as soon as they can. The Ultimate Dragon that War brought into feud with Ultimo Dragon is Calgary wrestler Brett Thunderbird Como, who is the master of the shooting star press called the Comotizer. Perry Saturn and John Cronus, the Eliminators from USWA, are getting a big push on this tour, going undefeated in matches generally with Lionheart and partners like Kim Duke and Warlord. They've been doing cage matches on top with Gedo and Jado and Hiromichi Fuyuki every night. Ultimo Dragon retained his NWA middleweight title on February 12 in Hiroshima, pinning Dos Caras. Genichiro Tenryu will actually return on February 21 at Koji Kill's Korakuen Hall show. In return on March 11 at Korakuen Hall on the War show, it'll be Tenryu and Mystery Partner vs. Kao and Mystery Partner. In FMW, Hideki Hasaka captured the independent junior title from Riki Fuji on February 6 in Okazaki. Eagle Sawai earned a title shot at LLPW champ Noriyo Tadano on March 17 at Korakuen Hall by beating Miki Handa on the February 10 show. After the match, Handa turned heel and went berserk, attacking Shinobu Kandori and Rumi Kazama. Shinya Kojika and Kazuo Sakurada, Kendo Nagasaki, will debut their Dai Nippon Pro Wrestling promotion on March 16 with help from Eva and Takashi Ishikawa's Tokyo Pro Wrestling. They are bringing in Tony Norris, Ron Powers and Danny Davis plus Eva is supplying Iceman, Ricky Santana, and Crypt Keeper, Jose Estrada Jr., as Americans, plus they'll be using several Korean wrestlers. Eva's next tour is March 2 to March 11. Biggest shows are March 3 in Hiroshima. Headhunters defend Eva tag titles against CMLL champs Silver King and El Texano, Leatherface and Cactus Jack vs Shoji Nakamaki and Hiroshi Ono, and March 7 at Korakuen Hall, Cactus Jack and Leatherface vs Nakamaki and Ono in a barbed wire match with 20,000 thumbtacks around the ring, and Kendo Nagasaki and Nobutaka Arai vs Headhunters. All Japan women will go with Asia Kong defending the WWWA title against Manami Toyota as the main event on March 26 at Yokohama Arena. They are also negotiating to bring in Kim Gracie, the wife and business manager of Rickson Gracie, for an exhibition match on that show. Mariko Yoshida and Rita Mata have a match on February 15 against Tomoko Watanabe and Kumiko Maekawa, with the winning team getting a shot at the Japanese tag team titles, held by LLPW's Carol Midori and Michiko Omukai, at the Yokohama show. Also Bison Kimura and Lioness Asuka and Jaguar Yokota will be a trio in a six-man. February 26 at Korakuen Hall has an elimination tag with Kong and Toshio Yamada and Kyoko Inoue and Yoshida vs Yumiko Hata and Toyota and Takako Inoue and Saki Hasegawa, with the final four remaining going to the April 2 Tokyo Dome for a tag team match, plus Yokota and Asuka and Kimura vs Setsuko Mita and Mima Shimoda, and Suzuka Minami and Kaoru Ito defends the Japanese title against Watanabe. They've announced 5 of the 8 teams for the WWWA 100th Tag Team Title Tournament on March 21 at Osaka Castle Hall. Hata and Minami, Kyoko, and Takako Inoue, Mita and Shimoda, Toyota and Blizzard Yuki and Kong and Yoshida. USWA. Sid Vicious as a babyface forming a tag team with Jerry Lawler against Big Daddy Cyrus and Crusher Bones popped the February 13 crowd up to 1,800 fans, which is actually a few hundred more than the February 6 show, which saw Lawler vs Vicious for the title. On February 6, Vicious had vowed that if he lost to Lawler, he'd never show his face again at the Mid-South Coliseum. On the TV prior to the match, Lawler offered to put his SMW title up against Vicious' unified title, but Vicious made some negative remarks about SMW, saying he wasn't interested in their title, saying that was a company of wrestlers who can get a job anywhere else. They opened the February 11 television show saying that Vicious lost the title and has left the area. Lawler then had a television match against Cyrus, ending with Bones interfered for the DQ. Bill Dundee and Brian Christopher did a face-to-face interview where Dundee wound up slapping Christopher in the face and the two rolled around on the floor. Dundee is still a babyface even though he's feuding with other faces. This wound up with a Dundee vs Christopher match on February 13 with the winner getting a shot at Lawler's title that night. Dundee won the match via DQ when Christopher was caught with a chain, however Lawler then pinned Dundee to keep the strap. Vicious Steel started when Lawler did an interview and said that he knew Vicious was watching the show live and only lived 20 minutes from the studio, and asked him to come to the studio because he had something he wanted to tell him face to face. Later in the show, when Spellbinder, Bones, Cyrus and Big Business Brown, new area heel manager, all jumped Lawler, Vicious made the save. Lawler asked him to be his tag partner for February 13 against Bones and Cyrus, which he accepted. Vicious also said he wanted Spellbinder as well. In the match after Lawler and Vicious won, Spellbinder, Brown, Bones and Cyrus beat up on both, and Spellbinder whipped Vicious with his weightlifting belt until Vicious made his own save, got the belt and chased the heels off. On television, Scott Studd beat Reggie B. Fine in a match where both Miss Texas and Sweet Georgia Brown interfered to set up mixed tags, and Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert went to a television time draw with Moondogs. SMW. Only 2 house shows this past week on February 10 in Lake City, Tennessee and February 11 in Morristown, Tennessee, using Gangstas vs Scott Armstrong and Tracy Smothers as the new Southern Boys managed by Jim Cornette in the headline spot, drawing 200 and 450 respectively. Al Snow starts on the road on February 23. Even though the Gangstas did an interview talking about how they aren't like Junkyard Dog and Too Cold Scorpio, that wasn't a hint that either of the two are going to come in and feud with them, as there are no plans whatsoever of that. Latest Cornette controversy involves Pro Wrestling Torch columnist Bruce Mitchell. Back in August, Mitchell wrote a both biting and satirical column basically critical of Cornette's Gangstas gimmick, which Cornette was up in arms about for numerous reasons, one of which was because his girlfriend's name was mentioned in the column. This resulted in a series of threatening phone calls to both Mitchell and editor Wade Keller saying what he'd do if he ever saw either of them. Some months later, as is well known, Cornette took a baseball bat to the windows of the car of former employee Casey O'Connor, who is Mitchell's longtime friend, over a different reason, largely because O'Connor wouldn't return Cornette's personal video camera, claiming SMW owed his expense money when he previously worked there. Anyway, on February 6 when SMW did television in Lenoir, North Carolina, both Mitchell and O'Connor, who Cornette settled out of court with and O'Connor then dropped vandalism charges against him, attended. Cornette didn't realize it during the show as nobody told him, figuring doing television is stressful enough with adding anything to it. Cornette found out after the show, which resulted in yet another threatening phone call to Mitchell telling him never to come back to his shows or he'd fight him right then and there. I'm still pretty sure the most damaging thing to Cornette isn't anything ever written about him, but every time he appears on WWF television managing Mantor, particularly right now because it creates confusion in his own territory when he's managing the baby faces here and the heels there. In the angle where the Gangstas buried Bob Armstrong under a flag at the February 6 tapings, it was a flag with an X, as in Malcolm X, on it. Expect Bobby Blaze to return with a new gimmick at the next television. ECW. Sandman is going to be kept off shows until early March because he's still shaken up from the concussion on the February 4 show, although he's doing okay. Public Enemy is also being kept off until March 3 to sell the angle where Chris Benoit powerbombed Sabu onto Rocco Rock and through the table on the same show to heat up a grudge for upcoming Philadelphia shows. Thus far the only new stuff from here are lineups for February 24 in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko vs Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck, Ian Rotten vs Axel Rotten, Shane Douglas vs Hector Guerrero for ECW title, and Sabu vs Too Cold Scorpio, March 3 at Northeast Catholic High School in Northeast Philadelphia, Douglas vs Tully Blanchard for ECW title, Sabu vs Osamu Nishimura, Malenko defending TV title vs Scorpio, Sandman vs JT Smith in a cane match, Tommy Dreamer vs Steve Richards and Benoit vs Tasmaniac, March 4 at Cheney University, Douglas vs Scorpio for the title with Blanchard as referee, Public Enemy vs Sabu and Tasmaniac, Sandman vs Dreamer in a cane match, Whipwreck vs Paul Loria. Added to the February 25 Philadelphia card is Cactus Jack vs mystery opponent managed by Woman, who may wind up being DC Drake. The Chris Benoit vs Al Snow match from February 4 aired on television this past week, and they aired still footage of the Public Enemy vs Sabu and Tasmaniac match but showing video of the powerbomb through the table by Benoit. They concluded with a lengthy Benoit interview which was 400% improved over anything he's ever done before, although he's still not where he needs to be on interviews if they want him to be a drawing card or a standout in a promotion which has some of the best interviews around. Heyman wanted to air a tape of Sabu and Tasmaniac from the February 12 Karaku and Hall show against Kengo Kimura and Kunyaki Kobayashi as an ECW tag title defense in Japan. However, since Booker Koshinaka decided Sabu and Taz were going down, the match almost surely won't air on ECW. Here and there. National Wrestling Council drew another sellout, this time about 1,050 fans, on February 11 at the Silver Nugget in Las Vegas for a phenomenal match, probably the first and only one of his career, featuring Virgil. That's because Virgil's opponent, Terry Funk, put on a one-man show, complete with fighting fans and setting his branding iron on fire and using it on Virgil. Junkyard Dog, who has moved to Las Vegas, worked underneath. Next show is March 17 with Funk vs Sabu in a chain match for the vacant NWC title. Tito Santana was the first champ and decided against coming back to defend the title. With Sabu and Cactus Jack drawing about 1,500 in the same building for a cage match, this is the hottest indie group in a while. EVA Japan promoter Victor Quiñones held a show on February 12 in the Dominican Republic with an EVA tag team title match featuring Headhunters defending against Johnny Gomez and Chico, obviously not Freddie Prinze or Merced Solis, and an 8-man tournament with 8 countries represented for the vacant UWA, Mexico, middleweight title. Most of the wrestlers are unknown, such as El Modelo, Dominican Republic, Sexy Man, Guatemala, The Lion, Año 2004, Puerto Rico, and Cat Killer, Panama. Jose Estrada, the 1970s WWF jobber who now lives in Puerto Rico, is being billed as the WWF American rep. For trivia buffs, Estrada was the WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion who lost the title to Tatsumi Fujinami in the late 70s, who went to Japan with the title and along with Satoru Sayama made Junior Heavyweight Wrestling into a big deal, while Takashi Okano represents Japan and El Texano represents Mexico. Johnny Smith, John Hindley, from England, the All Japan wrestler billed as the brother of Davey Boy Smith, actually no relation, returned to Calgary for Canadian Rocky Mountain Wrestling on February 10 for a main event match, beating Rick Titan, Big Titan, via DQ. There is a lot of talk that Lance Storm, Chris Jericho and even veterans like Keith Hart and Leo Burke may be headed in for this group. Former wrestler Paul Butcher Vachon finished way out of the running in the February 13 national elections in Canada. Vachon, father of Luna, was running as a representative of the New Democratic Party in Brome, Missisquoi, about 50 miles southeast of Montreal, winding up with 338 votes, well short of the 17,000 plus he'd have needed to win the office. Steel City Wrestling has shows March 17 in Pittsburgh at Plum High School, Doink the Osborne vs. Sheriff Steel plus Johnny Gunn and Dan Severn, March 26 at North Catholic High in Pittsburgh, Jake Roberts vs. Moondog Bubba White plus Demolition Axe, April 8 in Connellsville, Pennsylvania, Roberts vs. Axe, and April 9 at the Pittsburgh School for the Deaf, Roberts, Axe, Big Bully Bizich. Killer Kowalski's IWF on February 18 in Franklin, Massachusetts and February 19 in Milford, Massachusetts has Tito Santana as the top star on both shows. CWA on March 25 in Andover, Maryland has Rick Martel, Johnny Gunn, and Tony Atlas. Doug Ward has shows March 10 in Culpeper, Virginia with Doug Gibson, promoter Doug Ward, and Johnny Ringo vs. Story and Terry Funk in a cage, and March 11 in Staunton, Virginia with Gibson, billed as WCW star Doug Gibson, vs. Terry Funk in a cage and Ringo vs. Story Funk. Don Parker is promoting a group called Pro Wrestling International out of Indianapolis, using mostly the crew that worked as Indiana Championship Wrestling of late. February 17 in Compton, California has Pilato Suicida defending the WWA of California middleweight strap against Phobia, younger brother of Psychosis, plus Damien on the card. Supposedly Jim Crockett, who wants nothing to do with the current NWA, failed to pay his organizational dues and the current NWA wants him to stop billing his Texas shows as NWA. We were told they've even sent him a cease and desist order. WCW. Notes from the TV tapings on February 8 at Center Stage. Most of the taping was for the February 18 TBS show and they did all the interviews live talking about the pay-per-view show. The interviews were said to be better than usual. Gene Okerlund wasn't there, probably because they were selling that he was already in Baltimore, so Nick Bockwinkel was out as the third wheel. The hype of the show was built around the February 11 show where there was a Ric Flair video montage and Flair said he'd be there next week and wanted to talk with Bockwinkel. During a Kevin Sullivan and Butcher interview, Kevin said tell him Brutus, which is the first time they've used that name in a while. Dick Slater was absent from the Stud Stable interviews, so he may be gone. Slater was only brought in initially because Arnold Anderson's injury was thought to be worse than it turned out to be. Scott Armstrong and Mike Davis did a squash match with Harlem Heat and it took 4 takes for them to get the Heat and Sherry interview down right. TV Main was a TV title match where Anderson kept the title going to a 10-minute draw with Johnny B. Bad in what I was told was the worst TV match the two have had in this current program because it was really slow until the final 2 minutes. The show ended with Bockwinkel's face-off with Flair. Flair told Bockwinkel he's tired of watching wrestling on television. Geez, with the WCW television the past 3 months. Who isn't? And wants back in. Flair tells Bockwinkel he's not going to wrestle, yeah right, but wants back in even if he has to buy the company from Turner. I wonder if, after comparing bottom line profits, Turner wouldn't be willing to trade those half dozen or so Gold's franchises even up for WCW. Flair then said he had 2 front row tickets for Super Brawl and indicated he had some sort of a plan involving Vader. During the February 11 video package, which was excellent, Flair said he was the only man to have faced both Hogan and Vader in title matches and predicted that Vader would win, which sets the stage for his returning as Vader's partner in May. One thing the video package made clear is that the Saturday television show will improve just by having a weekly Flair interview. Next Center Stage is February 22 with future dates as of now being March 7, March 8, March 22, April 5 and April 12. The feud now leaves the wrestling ring and heads to the NASCAR track. WCW has entered into a 1-year sponsorship agreement with Winston Cup driver Billy Standridge for all 31 scheduled events in 1994. WCW plans to use Standridge as part of their wrestling company promotion. WWF is also in that ballpark as they're sponsoring Bob Holly this NASCAR season. Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart signed a record deal with Select Records on March 13 during the Toy Fair in New York. Hogan already has an album out in Germany. For newer fans who may not know this, back in the 60s, Hart was part of a band called the Gentrys that had a few gold records, including 2 songs that still get significant play today on oldies stations: Keep On Dancin' and Cinnamon Girl. Harley Race is really going through a rough stretch. After undergoing major hip replacement surgery from his auto accident on January 24, this past week he was dropped in the hospital and the entire surgery had to be redone. Race is apparently scared that this could mean the end of his wrestling career. New record for height exaggeration. Åkerlund on WCW on February 11 called Avalanche 6'10". In the Sumo Association annuals they list John Tenta as 6'4" 3/4 inches. Love the Diamond Dallas Page/Dave Sullivan angle as long as they keep it verbal, skits and arm wrestling. I'm dreading if they actually have a match on a big show. Hogan's shoot comment of the week during his interview was where for no apparent reason he started talking about New York and then said all other wrestling organizations were second-rate and all the promoters knew Hogan Vader was the biggest match in wrestling right now. Besides the Flair video, the February 11 TBS show had a Sting video package that was also great and a Vader/Hogan video package. TV ratings the weekend of February 4 saw Saturday Night do a 2.5, Main Event a 1.8 and Pro a 1.6. WWF. Nothing of major consequence from the house shows this past weekend. The most interesting angle may have been on February 12 in Philadelphia where during a Razor Ramon vs. Bob Backlund match, Dick Murdoch came out to ringside with Backlund. However, when Murdoch got to the ring, he got on the PA talking about how much he liked Philadelphia and how glad he was to be back in town, which got Backlund mad. The finish of the match saw Ramon take a bump and land on Murdoch, who then jumped in the ring and attacked him for the DQ and beat on him while Backlund put him in the chicken wing. Crowds were basically average. Pittsburgh did 5,075 and Philadelphia about 5,500 for a shows, and the other show was in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which sold out the small Catholic Youth Center. Tatsumi Fujinami was with Hakushi at the B Show in White Plains on February 11. Nothing definitive at press time regarding Jesse Ventura. Guess we'll have to tune in on February 20. Even though the early tickets sold listed 7 p.m. as the starting time for the March 13 Stockton Live Raw show, it'll actually start at 5:30 p.m. since Raw in most of the country starts at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Tammy Fitch or Tamara Murphy has already been taken off the event centers and will have a new role apparently as a cheerleader for Chris Condito, who debuts on television at this coming week's tapings. Condito is as of last word still supposed to be a babyface. At some point it's expected Fitch would turn, but that could be a year or more down the road. Monday Night Raw on February 6 did a 2.8 rating while Action Zone, Diesel vs. Owen Hart title match, did a 1.9 and Mania a 1.3. Add Henry Godwin, Mark Canterbury, to the injured list with a back injury described as really painful, and he was out of action the past weekend. Rumors abound that Roddy Piper will be in Diesel's corner for the match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. I was cringing watching the Action Zone this past weekend when Lex Luger wrestled Tatanka and Luger delivered a back suplex, and Jim Ross said that in some parts of the world they call it a Northern Lights suplex. I didn't even cringe as much the day before when during a Brian Pillman squash, Tony Schiavone called 2 entirely different moves within about a 2-minute span: arm drag and twist, one of which actually was what he described. Ross was back working with Todd Pettingle and the chemistry seems to have gotten a little better. The post-WMTV tapings have been switched. Now it'll be Raw on April 3 from Poughkeepsie, Superstars on April 4 from Albany, New York, and Challenge on April 5 in Lowell, Massachusetts. There will also be a live Raw on June 26 from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Reader letters. Awards. How can Toshiaki Kawada be Wrestler of the Year? The man only ranked 262nd in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Top 500. There are many more deserving wrestlers in Japan alone, such as Haruka Eigen and Mr. Chin. Even the Aftermag readers knew better than to vote for such an unworthy candidate. That's why Hulk Hogan won the award. Apter even knew the vote tallies before the people voted because that's how well he knows his audience. I was really surprised that Shawn Michaels vs. Razor Ramon won Match of the Year. With the international scope of the newsletter, it's good to be reassured that the U.S. wrestling scene isn't totally screwed up. Robert Solari to Detroit, Michigan. The Steve Williams Toshiaki Kawada title change match should be required viewing in every wrestling office. Without fancy costumes, exotic dives, a xenophobic angle, paid cheerleaders or merchandise displayed, they produced a masterpiece of wrestling psychology. The final minutes witnessed 2 wrestlers playing the audience on an emotional roller coaster. Hope turned to despair as Kawada sold a Williams corner dropkick. After Kawada made an ineffective comeback, utter despair set in as the old script of the exhausted but gallant warrior was presented. A Japanese version of the Horatio Alger story culminated in Kawada pinning Williams. The tape is exceptional in that it captures the shifting emotions of the crowd. Chants of Kawada turn to quiet resignation and then to a rush of exhilaration. Spectators crying and the scene of Kawada hoisted on the shoulders of the other wrestlers as he exults are captured. The final slow-mo montage on the fade is brilliant editing. All credit should go to Williams and Kawada for producing a great work that should be enjoyed and studied. This is the best match I've ever seen because of the emotion. Richard Siegel, Bethpage, New York. Joey Styles is best announcer? Do you have a large circulation among people who are hearing impaired? Mike Rosenthal, Miami, Florida. Although I had to pick Toshiaki Kawada as Wrestler of the Year, my pick for second place was Shinya Hashimoto. Before 1994, I couldn't understand why New Japan would even push this guy. But he's made me quite a fan this past year. It's hard to figure out why. He's not a monster, but he works stiff. His psychology is intense. His facial expressions are great. His matches make it easy to suspend disbelief and believe he's really destroying his opponents. The Mikey Whipwreck gimmick was so simple, so stupid and so obvious that it had to work. I can't believe nobody has ever done something like this before. He's the highlight of the ECW TV shows, especially when they let him do interviews. Scott Homan, Weymouth, Massachusetts. Guatemala. I'm writing to let you know that Lucha Libre in Guatemala is alive and well. It's not nearly as popular as in Mexico, but everyone is aware of it. There are several shows every Sunday. I spent 2 weeks there and didn't get to attend any shows, but I bought the wrestling magazines every week. I didn't see any familiar names except for La Parquita and Astro Boy, and I'm not sure if they were the originals. They had an article about Blue Tiger coming in from Mexico. From the photos I think it's either Felino or Nuevo Links. They also had an article saying that Fuerza Guerrera is negotiating to be coming in. I also attended an independent show in Mérida, Mexico. They were all local wrestlers from the Yucatan, but it was a decent show. The main event had 6 good workers, good heat, smooth spots, topes and ECW-style brawling with incredible chair shots. The price was right, 10 pesos, or less than $2. R. Scott Houston, Ocean City, Maryland. WWF. The interview segment between Vince McMahon and Kevin Nash on the February 6 Monday Night Raw was the best WWF piece I've seen in a very long time. I don't know if this was a direct result of Jim Ross working in the WWF office, but judging from his past work I would be inclined to think it must be at least partially. The realistic approach that the WWF is starting to take is so refreshing in light of the hopelessness at WCW. I hope WWF continues to push Kevin Nash because he seems very credible, like Bret Hart, and unlike Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger. Harley York, Garnerville, New York. Do you think the WWF made a prudent move in making Diesel champion? Personally, I feel Vince McMahon has sacrificed his strongest drawing card in Bret Hart. Edie Bailey, Aberdeen, Maryland. DM, the situation in comparing the two is this. Bret Hart will never be a super drawing card. Diesel probably won't be either. But when the decision was made, nobody knew that. Titan, as always, was looking to create a new Hulk Hogan, and clearly Bret Hart will never be that person. Nobody else may be for a long time, but someone saw this gigantic guy was getting great crowd reactions as a heel and appeared to have a lot of charisma, so at the time it looked to be at least a decent gamble, and nobody ever struck gold in pro wrestling without having to gamble on pushing unknowns to the moon at one point or another. Usually it doesn't work, but all you need is one success. Thus far it hasn't succeeded, but Hart also hasn't been sacrificed. If it doesn't work, they can always go back to Hart in a credible manner. Out of curiosity, is Lex Luger still married? The reason I ask is that during the Lex Express tour, they made sure we knew Lex was a family man. Now, during the promos for the Royal Rumble, it's Lex's voice you hear on Pamela Anderson's answering machine telling her they'll do the town after he wins the Rumble, and there's roses on her table with a card that says Lex and Pamela. Is he now single, or are we supposed to forget everything they tried to shove down our throats? Francis Winterfeld, Bronx, New York. DM, they don't count on wrestling fans having that good of a memory. State of Wrestling. It should be interesting tracking the UFC's influence on pro wrestling. The macabre cartoon of the major U.S. companies has become a self-parody and hasn't learned the well has run dry, and a new fresh formula needs to be found. WCW is burdened with an embarrassing financial ledger. With all due respect to the behind-the-scenes pressures and problems, Bischoff's approach to copy a stale formula is only going to lead to stale results. Isn't the business potential of going with a fresh approach much higher? The promoter that can tap the fan base UFC tapped into and shed the dated US approach will be doing the Dion high step into their bank. Wrestling Perspective ran an editorial called Death in the Fast Lane that attributed Art Barr's death to being raised in a worked sport that as he grew blinded him to reality. I have a couple of questions concerning this article. Do you agree Art Barr's death is attributable to the fantasy/reality blur? Aside from the irony of the fantasy/reality blur that makes some wrestlers and wrestling people become their own marks, does being involved in a worked business cause a self-deceit that is prevalent enough to be called an occupational hazard? When the Super Luchas ran the graphic photos of Liz Mark Jr.'s surgery, was this a photographic editorial about the dangerous tope evolution in Mexico? Kevin Donlin, Baltimore, Maryland. DM, I'm not sure that article blamed Art Barr's death on the fantasy/reality blur. Since we don't even know what Art Barr died from, nor presumably will we ever, it's ridiculous to blame pro wrestling or growing up in a pro wrestling environment for what very well could have been a freak of nature occurrence. In many people in wrestling, the blur does cause a self-deceit that could definitely be called an occupational hazard. The Super Luchas photo spread wasn't an editorial statement as much as Mexico publishes far more gruesome photos in the media simply due to the nature of the culture than do other cultures like that in the United States. Mexico press is big on photos of dead bodies in caskets or graphic photos of accident victims, which doesn't go over well in American press. It's neither better or worse inherently, just a different way each culture has evolved. Pertaining to what is Major League and Minor League, I can relate that many are only interested in WCW and WWF. Living in the Northeast, aside from reading The Observer, I'm only exposed to those two. My cable system doesn't even carry TBS, so I have to have someone tape clashes for me. Video stores around here carry only WWF. People are going to be most interested in things they see on a regular basis, and here that is WWF and WCW. But if exposed, people would be interested in other promotions. I lent several friends of mine the Survivor Series and had When Worlds Collide at the end of the tape and told them all to watch it as an experiment. Every one of them thought AAA was a great show. AAA, ECW and SMW should make their tapes available for sale. I know you can trade, but that's tough when all you have is WWF and WCW. As for the issue covering the death of Art Barr, my two favorite issues of the year outside of the year-end issue were that week and the issue the week of the death of Boris Malenko. Lee Lockwood, Ballston Spa, New York. I'm writing to disagree with the pessimistic attitude of many on the future of wrestling. I found it upsetting to read the letter by Sandy Krebs. While he was correct with many of his points, I'd like to talk about the positives he may have overlooked. First is Sabu signing with New Japan. Next is the arrival of a true new generation star into the WWF and Kensuke Shinzaki. Matches with him against 1-2-3 Kid or Bret Hart could be classics. They have a fresh new program in the wings in Diesel vs. Shawn Michaels, which should do good business. WCW should do good business with Hogan vs. Vader. The sky's the limit for ECW. Having attended all their shows and watched their television, I can only imagine Paul Heyman is going to top himself this year. The man is a booking genius. Add AAA, Shoot Wrestling, SMW and great new monsters like Mike Awesome, Big Titan, and the Headhunters, and fans worldwide have much to look forward to in 1995. Rob Naylor, Cole Township, Pennsylvania. I don't think either WWF or WCW have quite caught on to what's going on with all the changes in the business. I also think the management of the companies are too arrogant to realize what disasters they are perpetrating. Bill Levine, Oakland, California. Coverage. Regarding the mini controversy regarding coverage in your pages, I don't watch WWF or WCW. I watch everything else. My favorites are Pancrase, U, W, F, I, New and All Japan, and Galavision Lucha Libre. I'd like to see less WWF and WCW coverage and more of everything else. Glenn Fox, Seattle, Washington. The letter from James Holt was a crock. How can he compare UFC with seeing Honky Tonk Man wrestle on Saturday night? I'd love to see Honky Tonk Man step into the octagon with Royce Gracie. I don't see how anyone can prefer fake to real. Pro wrestling pay-per-view shows pale in comparison to the UFC. UFC makes pro wrestling look stupid. UFC is going to steal a lot of wrestling fans because they are selling reality with great fighters and not trying to push washed-up old men with no ability. After seeing pro wrestling, UFC was a godsend, and I wish you would start giving them more coverage. J. Smith, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. DM, history has shown as a general rule when it comes to wrestling, people prefer fake over real. Look at any marketing comparison of the popularity of pro wrestling versus amateur wrestling at any time that pro wrestling was worked, and it bears that out. ECW. I've just gotten started watching and taping ECW on MSG cable. After 2 weeks, these are my impressions. The show is inconsistent. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Scott Levy's new identity of Raven sucks. I saw The Crow, and trust me, this gimmick is several months too late to get over. James O'Barr should sue for copyright infringement. Steve Richards doesn't excite me in the least. Public Enemy can be equally obnoxious and hilarious at the same time. Their television match with Sabu and Tasmaniac was worth at least 3.5 stars. Jason is a cross between Paul E. Dangerously and Rick Rude. I can live with either singularly, but a hybrid between the two doesn't make it. The Giant Paul Loria? Please. Shane Douglas may have gotten over dissing Ric Flair, but in trying to become a Flair copy on the 111 television show, he turned himself into a hypocrite. I have no respect for Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko's gimmicks. To me, for now, it's a thumbs in the middle. Jacob Gilbert, Troy, New York. Over the past few months I've done quite a bit of traveling around the world in order to experience and compare how each promotion ranks, both in terms of talent and the overall experience of seeing them live. 1/7 at the ECW arena would be right up there with seeing All Japan Women at the Tokyo Dome. I left the 1/7 show completely exhausted and satisfied. Many I spoke to were very unhappy about the Shane Douglas vs. Tully Blanchard match. I beg to differ. They put on a great wrestling match. It just wasn't the right style for Philadelphia. Overall I thought it was a superb card. I realize many of the regulars are used to something better. No matter how bad the card could or would have been, I'd have been happy with it. I'd rank the atmosphere right up there with All Japan Men and FMW at Korakuen Hall. Peter Paulson, Hudson, Quebec. After seeing the ECW television show from Orlando with Cactus vs. Sandman and Public Enemy vs. Sabu and Tasmaniac, it sunk in just how truly deserving Joey Styles is in getting voted Best Announcer. I was at the show live and those two matches were awesome, but seeing them on top with Styles' commentary took them up another notch. If ECW television gets more exposure over the next year, I don't think the voting will even be close. Jeff Zinger, Woodstock, Ontario. I was part of a van full of fans that braved a snowstorm to get from Boston to Philadelphia to see the February 4th ECW show. This was my first time seeing an ECW show live. After seeing the show, I can't understand what ECW's critics are talking about. It seems too many fans lose sight of what they started watching wrestling for in the first place. They talk about the state of the business or things they have no idea about. They forget they started watching wrestling because it was fun. The big two haven't been much fun in recent years. Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff must wonder where all the fans have gone. Perhaps if their wrestlers didn't just go through the motions at house shows, didn't treat their fans arrogantly and had more professional pride, they wouldn't be in the position they're in. In contrast, the February 4th show was the most fun I've had watching wrestling since I was a kid. Everyone on the card worked to the best of their ability to put on a good show. This was great brawling, great high spots and great technical work. I met most of the ECW wrestlers and they seemed legitimately grateful for their support, and I had a great time meeting fans from Ohio, Virginia, California and other places. So if you want to waste money on bad PPVs and whine about the state of wrestling, I've had enough of listening to it. I'll definitely be back to the ECW arena again. David Doyle, Braintree, Massachusetts. Announcing. I've been watching a tape of wrestling from France in 1992. Every American promotion could learn a lot from the commentary by Original Williams. He delivers somewhat like a 1950s American wrestling announcers, but he gets the wrestling and the wrestlers over. He even gets the not-so-good wrestlers over. In one match, I learned more and he got Steve Regal over more than WCW has in all the time he's wrestled there. He even acknowledged that Regal was negotiating with both WWF and WCW and would be leaving Europe next year for America. When was the last time an American promotion told us one of our favorite wrestlers would be leaving for another promotion? Never. They just job him out and hope we forget he ever existed. No wisecracks. No ethnic or racial slurs. No innuendo. No getting over himself and others who aren't in the ring. No overhyping the next big show and no stupid 900 number plugs. It's so easy. Just get the talent in the ring over and treat the fans like humans and give fans a good product and fans will come to the shows. Bobby Yates, Randleman, North Carolina. 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 Bobby Yates 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 Randleman.